What does it mean to be saved? Hi everyone, welcome to Ask and Response with R.A. Sweeney, where I maybe don't answer all of your questions, but at least try to give a hopefully useful response to questions I receive from all of you on all things Bible related. So here recently, I posted a video talking through the idea of like, can you lose your salvation? What does that look like? And perhaps that wasn't the best place to really dive into that question because I got a lot of feedback, a lot of pushback, honestly, from people who couldn't really defend their position. Just they were taught like, oh, well, no, you can't, or yes, you can. And were very argumentative, but they didn't really know how to defend that. Like I would bring up things and they would just change the subject, which is very, very common. That if somebody changes the subject when they argue with you, it means they don't know what they're talking about. They just are ingrained in their position. But the common denominator that I noticed from the pushback that I kept getting, and honestly, some positive comments that I got as well, the common denominator that I saw in all these is I feel like we have a pretty poor understanding of what it means to be saved, which I think is maybe going to trouble some people. So I want to express, like, I was given a very, very small picture of what salvation means, very incomplete, lots of holes and wrong information, and I met Jesus and had a real conversion moment. I've seen the fruit of that pouring out in my life. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that I was saved. But my understanding of what that meant was very, very poor. Just like when you're born, like, yes, it's very clear that you are born, but you don't really understand what that means for a very long time, probably. So in the same way, like, I don't want to tell people here that if you haven't believed this story, that you aren't saved. That's not what I'm saying at all. I don't want this to be trying to like poke holes or making people uncomfortable with their salvation. That's not what I'm doing. If you've had an experience with Jesus and seen like, I've accepted him as my Lord and Savior and, I see him working in my life, like, yeah, great. Chances are, I'm not going to blanket statement anybody else's salvation, but chances are if you've experienced those things, like you've had a real salvation moment. But I feel like there's more to the story that I want to dive into. So I think probably the most helpful thing in understanding salvation is to look at Exodus. That said, I love Genesis. I don't know if you guys have noticed yet. I talk about Genesis all the time, and there's some really, really good foundational stuff there, but I feel like that all builds to the Exodus point. So I feel like all of Genesis funnels into understanding Exodus, and then from Exodus it spreads back out to funnel back into understanding the gospel. So it's kind of like the like two pivotal moments in the Bible that we're supposed to understand things through. And if you ask, why, Reed? Why do you think that Exodus is so important? Why is that the text for understanding salvation? The reason I'm always going to point to is if you look at the gospel narrative that you see in the four accounts of the gospel, there's so much that overlaps with the Exodus story. Like, Jesus is painted as a new Moses. Even Moses said, like, hey, one day there's going to be a new person like me, only better, who's going to be the one that leads us to the real promised land, the real Sabbath rest that we were hoping for. So there's going to be a new and better me. And Jesus presents himself as, I'm the one. I'm the one that Moses said was going to be coming, that you guys have been waiting for this whole time. It all comes back to this Moses-like figure. And you can see in the early life of Jesus, there's some patterning with like, there's some kind of reverse patterning in some of like the going to Egypt, leaving Egypt sort of imagery. There is hostility with the king. There's the death of the youths of the Hebrews, the oppression. Just like look at, like, if you were to map out, like, here's the progression of the story of Exodus. Some things might be like opposite direction or something like that, but it really follows very, very well. All the way into, Jesus passes through the waters. He goes out into the wilderness. He applies the Torah to defeat the tempter in the wilderness. He goes up onto a mountain and teaches the law to God's people like Moses did. Like, it's very, 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 I'll add a few more varies, similar in how the two stories are presented. All four writers of the four accounts of the gospel were very diligent to capture that Jesus was painting his story with an Exodus colored brush, so that we would all be thinking like, this is a new and better Exodus with a new and better Moses. And we see that all throughout the prophets too. Like, they're referencing that there's going to be a new Exodus, that there's going to be a new deliverance from exile and slavery, and all of, even just like slavery to sin and stuff like that. It's all coming from that Exodus narrative. So if we take the Exodus narrative, and then start looking at what the gospel is trying to tell us and how salvation works, there's kind of some key points there. So Exodus starts with the ruler of the wicked kingdom is enslaving and oppressing God's people, and their outcry is pouring out to God, and God hears it and he wants to respond. In response to hearing the outcry, not because anybody's doing anything good, not because anybody's earned it, no merit, just people are being oppressed, and God hates oppression. So he decides, I am going to act because of oppression. And even tells Moses that, like, I've heard the cry of my people, and I'm going to rescue them. He never says, my people are being really righteous, so I figured I should, do something for them. It's always, they are being oppressed, they're lowly and being pushed down even further. People are stepping on their throats to get higher, to elevate themselves. So I'm going to rescue the oppressed. Those who want to flee can. And so we see that's where the plagues come in and different things like that. And if you look carefully at those who are looking to God for protection find protection in God. So you see, like, for some of the things, it only happens outside, and there's a warning like, hey, this God that we're talking about, he says go inside. And so everyone who trusted him went inside and didn't suffer the plague. Some of it, certain regions experienced it. And ultimately, in the end, when we have the death of the firstborn, and you've got the Passover, there's an open invitation to everyone. We tend to think that this is a Jewish-only ceremony, but it's not presented that way. It's anyone who's in a house with a painted door will find rescue, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish. And anyone who did not paint the door or just isn't in the house will not be rescued, whether Jewish or not Jewish. So Jews that are not faithful will suffer the plague. Gentiles who are faithful will be rescued in the same way that the Jews are. And when they're leaving, you actually see that it says that it's a mixed multitude of peoples. It's not just Israelites. It's whoever else wants to come, whether it's Egyptians, whether it's people that are living there that are other ethnicities. Like, everybody's free to come under this protection and leave. So you've got this moment of freeing the slaves, freeing the oppressed, that's only based on the outcry of the oppressed. They're suffering, God's delivering them, and he is setting them free. But then you see they go through the waters and they end up in the wilderness, and it's not done. Like, the story doesn't end there. It's not just like everybody who crossed through the waters automatically goes into the promised land. In fact, most of them don't go into the promised land. And so we see there's the time of, are you going to trust that the person who just rescued you out is going to provide for you, or are you not? And then they get to Mount Sinai and they're given the law, and they're meant to be transformed by the law and then go do the things that the law commands. They're supposed to live it out as a new type of new humanity. And then from there, they go to the promised land and they're supposed to enter in. And in the story, they say, we don't trust you. Really the whole time. Like, they rebel so much. Like, multiple times they don't trust they're going to get water. Multiple times they're complaining about food. They're complaining about Moses as their leader in a couple different places. Like, everything. They don't want it. They don't want to follow. They don't trust God. And so in the end, think of like even just with the spies, 12 went in, 12 came out. 10 said, we're not going in. They died in the wilderness. 2 said, we absolutely should go in. They didn't. They didn't go. Well, I guess eventually they did. But at that time, they didn't go in. They just said we should. They trusted. But they were left in the wilderness while all the rebellious and those who didn't trust died off in the wilderness. You see a story of rebellion where the ground swallows up a whole group of people that have rebelled. You see that God sent poisonous serpents. In a lot of translations, it says fiery, but it's doing some wordplay there, and it really seems like they're just venomous serpents, and it's killing Israelites. And those who turn in faith to the cross are the ones that are saved. And so there's this picture of everyone set free regardless of merit, but then once you're set free, what do you do with that freedom? And depending on what you do with that freedom, you might come to an early doom, you might come to a painful and miserable doom, you might just have to be patient for a long time, or you might just enter the land. And that's the story of the gospel. Look at the book of Hebrews. It talks about like, hey, the Israelites never entered the rest that God had planned. They never made it to the seventh day creation, that the seventh day rest that God had planned, that never came to be anywhere in the story. And so it says like, you guys need to make sure that you do, when the opportunity comes, enter into the seventh day rest. Joshua did not lead them to the seventh day rest. There remains this ultimate seventh day rest to come, even after Jesus' time. So when we bring that back to the gospel, people have been languishing under the oppression of sin, and purely as an act of grace, God came, he sent Jesus to defeat the power of sin and death and the enemy, and he rescued us from that kingdom, and we're in the wilderness now. And the question is, who's going to be faithful? Who wants to be a part of that kingdom that God's trying to build? Who's excited about that seventh day rest and all the things that go with it that God is trying to implement? And so it's not like, oh, well, I want to go to heaven, so I'm being faithful. No. It's about building the kingdom and being excited about the types of things that go along with the kingdom, whether it's forgiveness, whether it's loving your neighbor, whether it's sacrificial generosity, whether it, any of the things that Jesus is teaching about. That's the people who, when they come to the border of the Jordan, are going to say, yeah, I think we should cross, because whatever's on the other side there, whether it's giants, fortified cities, doesn't matter. God's got it. And that's the story of the gospel is, yes, salvation comes from just the generous gift of Jesus freeing us. And that can't be rescinded. He's not going to be like, well, I decided I'm going to put you back in Egypt. We don't see that. He never sends anyone back. But when it comes to who's going to enter, many are going to come saying, Lord, Lord, we were in the wilderness with you. We went through the salvation moment with you. And he's going to be like, but you weren't excited about what we were doing here. You didn't like the slavery. You saved your own skin, but you're no more excited about generosity and love and compassion and those things than you were before I saved you. So yeah, you're freed from that, but you wouldn't like my kingdom. And I feel like that is where a lot of people start to get really twitchy about, it sounds like works-based salvation, and that's not at all what I'm saying. You're rescued from sin purely as a gift. And then you are given God's Spirit and his law and his teaching to try to show you what the kingdom's supposed to be like. And in the end, God's going to say, look, here's what I'm doing. Either you did want to be a part of it or you didn't, and I'm not going to force you to be a part of that. And so my position that I presented on the idea of once saved, always saved, is there's going to be a lot of people who, yeah, they got rescued out of the kingdom of the enemy, but they didn't have any interest in living out the things that build God's kingdom. And I'm not saying that we all have to do it perfectly, because we're not going to. We're going to mess it up all the time. But if that's the type of thing that I care about, the type of thing that I want, the thing that at least is the desire of my heart, so it's still not works, it's desire of the heart base. But like, if I delight in forgiveness and generosity and unity and all the things that are in keeping with the kingdom, he's going to say, that's what I saved you for, so that you can come be a part of this kingdom. But if I've been saved from my sin, and like Paul says, I just go right back into slavery saying like, no, I don't want to forgive people. No, I don't like the idea of giving generously. Like, none of those things are important to me. That's where we see the issue of like, there are people who won't actually enter in, even though they've been rescued out. And a lot of people aren't going to like that. A lot of people are going to, I'm sure, are going to send me nasty comments saying like, but that's the Exodus story. And the Exodus story is the quintessential story of the Jewish people. And it's the exact story that God said, this is how I want you to understand what Jesus is doing. And that's what we see in the letters. We see it in Hebrews. It's all throughout the whole New Testament is you're set free. Now, what are you going to do about it? And what you're going to do about it shows God what you're gonna where you're gonna end up when the seventh day rest opportunity comes, whether you get welcomed in or sent away as someone who Jesus never knew. And we see that as well in the story of the people that Jesus says like, yeah, come on in, because you fed the hungry and you gave drink to the thirsty and you clothed the naked and all those things. All of it comes down to, what did you do once you were set free from slavery? While you were a slave, you don't have a choice. That's what I forget if it's 1st or 2nd Timothy. Paul says, like, people are slaves to the enemy, being forced to do his will. And God says, yeah, that's not their fault. They're in slavery, being forced to do something. I will rescue them out. Now that you're out, what are you going to do about it? And that is your fault. And yes, we'll fail. And yes, we're going to mess up. And there's forgiveness for all those things. But if it's not even on my radar, not something I pursue, it's not something God's going to force on us, because he's going to give us what we want. And so recently I've had a few people that are universalists trying to convert me to universalism. Like, hey, you should read these books because it really explains how universalism works. And I think there's one school of thought that says like, hey, people who don't believe in Jesus deserve to be punished and they deserve to go to hell. And I'm not arguing that. I'm not saying I want them to go to hell because they deserve it. My point is, there are people who won't want what the kingdom is doing, and God says, this isn't for you. Not because I don't want you here, because you don't want you here. And so to me, I see that moment as God sorting what we want and giving us what we want. Those who want his kingdom get it. Those who don't want his kingdom get to go pursue their own interests. And that's why I don't believe in universalism. The argument for universalism would be that, well, in the face of God, everyone will have a change of heart and will desire that. I just don't see that in the Bible. I could be wrong. I kind of hope that I am wrong, because I don't want anyone to be excluded from the kingdom. Not one person in the world that I want to be excluded from the kingdom. So I hope that I am wrong. I don't think I am. But the Bible really presents it as there's going to be a time where people are given what they've always wanted. And if they haven't, just like in the story of Lazarus and the rich man, where he's like, well, send, somebody to warn my brothers. And Abraham's like, if they didn't believe the law and the prophets, like, they had a clear picture. If they didn't believe, nothing is going to change their mind. And I think that's what we're seeing at that moment of, I think by that point, hearts are hardened enough that it's like, okay, you didn't want this and you never will at this point. Like, you've had a clear enough picture and you won't want it. Again, I hope I'm wrong. That's where I see, maybe universalism could have some merit. I think there's too much pointing the opposite direction. But that's not up to me. Honestly, like, what do I care if universalism is true or not? Like, for now, my job is like, there's a lot of people who need to see the beauty of God and be a part of it. I'm more worried about what are we doing in the wilderness than what's going to happen at that meeting with Jesus point. So for me, it's not that important whether universalism is true or not, because I know what my assignment is right now, and that is to show the beauty of Jesus to everyone that I possibly can. So that's where I kind of land with salvation. If you've got questions, if you have comments, angry thoughts that you want to share with me, whatever, feel free to share all of those. I'd love to have the feedback. If you enjoy these videos, please like them so other people can share them. Subscribe so you get, the weekly reminder that these videos came out. Share them with friends that might appreciate these as well. So that just all of that, so that we can hopefully you guys can enjoy them, and hopefully we can spread the word about these videos as well. One last thing that I do want to mention is I've been doing these videos every single week, along with another series that I do on Wednesdays where I kind of look at wordplay and different linguistic things like that. I'm going to be switching it up a little bit here sometime in the next few weeks. I'm going to bump this down to maybe an every other week, along with that wordplay series. I'm going to do one or the other each week. That way it frees me up a little bit to work on some other things, bring you guys some more content on some other things that I hope you guys will like. So be looking for that in the near future, that these will probably be either this or wordplay each week, but we'll still be doing something each week. I'm not sure if I'll stick with Fridays or Wednesdays for that. We'll see, but that should be coming soon. But for now, I really appreciate all of you guys being here. This was kind of a longer video, but I appreciate you sticking it out. I hope it was a blessing, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.